Hi, and thanks very much, Adrian. Welcome, everybody. My name's Sarah White, and welcome to today's webinar on iPLS Skills Ladder, particularly looking at geography. Before we get any further, what I'd love to do is know, have I met you? Possibly in my sort of travels as an iPLS trainer, you might have joined me in one of our training sessions. If so, say hi and remind me of where in the world that was. Or alternatively in the chat, it would be great if you could let me know whereabouts are you? Where in the world? It's always interesting. I try and guess by names. Let me see if I was right. Where in the world are you? Which school are you? And are you primary or lower secondary? That would be a great help, because then I know during the webinar where to put some emphasis. So if I have mainly primary, obviously that will be my emphasis. If I have mainly secondary, I can do that. I can adapt things as we go along. But we've got a great group today. So as Adrian says, it's your chance to ask questions. So use the chat. That means everyone can see it. Use the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on those. Or we're more than happy if you put your hand up and unmute and directly ask your question. And there isn't a silly question. If you're thinking it, then somebody else is probably also thinking it and wants to ask that question. So nobody's joined me in the chat. Please let me know in the chat. Where are you? Where in the world are you? I think there's quite a few people here from Southeast Asia. It's lunchtime here in the UK. So it's early evening for you guys in Southeast Asia. Jaffrey Academy, oh hi, welcome. But Mombasa, I was due to go to Mombasa to do that. I know possibly it was either Joe or Catherine, colleagues of mine, came out. So that's lovely. We've got Malaysia, been to Malaysia many times, but haven't been to Maz. So do let me know in the chat whereabouts in the world you are and your school. And I'm leaving Adrian to we've got people joining us a bit late, and I'm letting Adrian, if you could kindly let those people on. Okay, so today's webinar is really about going through the skills ladder for geography. Pearson Skills Ladder have been around now for a couple of years, and they were written at the request of schools that they wanted something for the additional subjects, some extra support. But we know that some schools aren't quite sure about how to use the skills ladder. So that's the point of this session, is really to unpick what are the skills ladders, what do they give you to support you in planning your geography. So we'll have a look at what we have and how those resources are designed to support you, and actually then how you can use them when you're doing your planning for your geography lessons. And at the heart of them is really using your local context. I'm going to go through as well the actual process that we would love schools to undertake when considering their lessons and planning. What are the things that you need to think about when you're putting your lesson plans together? Now, the reason you're here is because obviously you teach geography, you are, I guess, an iPLS school, and you may have questions already, or maybe some colleagues have asked questions. Make sure you don't leave today's session without getting those answered. So thank you for putting that in the chat. That's great. We've got quite a few people from Mombasa. We've got people from India. We've got people from Nairobi, Malaysia. So that's fantastic. And thank you for sharing that in the chat. So the little bit about me. I was a primary lower secondary teacher for 30 years, both in the UK government schools, state maintained schools, and the private sector, before spending many years teaching in international schools outside of the UK. 10 years ago, I left teaching, having had many senior leadership roles and been a head teacher, to become a freelance educational consultant. I worked with the UK government's standards testing agency, and now I support and advise schools, as well as doing a lot of work with Pearson, both still in the UK, training teachers here in the UK, but also working with Pearson iPLS curriculum. So I'm not sure, can't recognize names there that I might have met you, but do let me know if we have met before on my travels. So I said that Pearson Skills Ladders are a couple of years old now. Pearson have what we call their core subjects for iPLS. And you can see here on the screen that our core subjects are English, maths, science, computing, and now we also have global citizenship, as well as our early years curriculum. These subjects give you the full curriculum down to the level of having lesson plans for these subjects. The foundation subjects, these additional subjects, and these vary what are taught in many different regions. Pearson have produced what we call skills ladders. So these are very much focused on what skills need to be taught for these subjects. And the documentation for this will sit alongside the curriculum documents and resources that you may already have for teaching these subjects. So we're going to go into that in a lot more detail. So the Geography Skills Ladder provides a comprehensive overview of the core geographical skills that students master from year 1 to grade 9 or year 9, before moving then on to their Geography International GCSE. So while the skills ladder predominantly focuses on the core skills that students need to develop during their geography studies, it's necessary to be integrated into a core geography knowledge curriculum. Now, for our students to be able to demonstrate their proficiency in the skills, they need a knowledge base to be able to do that. Now, geography is one of those subjects where we know it's taught best if you're using your local environment. And also some countries will have a national geography curriculum that you might be following. So the skills ladders sit alongside your geography knowledge curriculum. So what we've given you is not a geography full knowledge curriculum. It's the skills. And just checking that everybody's being let in here. We've got quite a few people joining late. So welcome to those who've just joined us. And I'm just going to sort of, before I move on, because it's just key what I've said there, is how what we're looking at today, our geography skills ladder, is really focused on core skills for geography. And it sits alongside that knowledge curriculum. So you might have a national knowledge curriculum in the country that you teach in. You might have a geography knowledge curriculum that you have devised yourself for your school, or it might be a purchased knowledge curriculum, or it might be that you have a set of textbooks and they have given you your outline of the knowledge that you covered. What we're giving you are the skills, because what we know happens is that often geography becomes very knowledge-based, and actually it's really very much a skills-based subject. And it's when it keeps on that skills base that children absolutely love it. I mean, I love teaching geography because it's so practical. It's when we lose that practicality and just focus on the knowledge that actually we often lose those learners and their potential love of this subject. So what we have here is our knowledge-based curriculum, and then we have our geography skills ladder, and we give you the skills in progression. So we know that studying geography provides students with a broad understanding of the world around them, and it gives them an insight into our rapidly changing world, allowing them to discover places near, as I've said already, using our locality, either immediate locality of the school, extending out to the village or the town or the city that you're in, including then the region that you're in there as well. And then maybe comparing a place that they have never visited, might never visit, and actually doing a comparison, as well as appreciating how they themselves can contribute towards becoming a successful citizen. So in our ever-changing world, educating our students about their role in the future preservation of our planet is really key, I think, today. Particularly, and I know anyone who's joined us on our implementation training, we look at this when we look at developing 21st century skills. We look at what is it that the skills we're actually looking to develop in our learners. So when students study their geography curriculum, it should be presented through thought-provoking questions about the physical and human environment at a local level, a national level, and then a global scale. So the geography curriculum as a whole equips them with the knowledge about different places, people, environments, physical and human processes, with students also demonstrating this understanding through a variety of different skills. So it's hard to teach skills without hanging them off knowledge. So what we've given you are the skills. You will have your knowledge curriculum in place. And as I say, that might be a national curriculum that you're following. It might be a curriculum that's provided by a different provider. It might even be one that you've designed, because it very much uses your location as its core. So the main sort of focus is that the skills are contextualized within your location. Sorry, the reason I'm hesitating, we've got lots of people joining late, and I'm just checking that they're being let in. So you're contextualizing these skills within your location, your country, your region, your area. And that's how we build the knowledge. So they've been designed this way so that you can follow your local interests, actually the resources you have in your region. And that's not going to be the same for all of us. Where I'm living here in the UK, I've got, I'm by the coast, I've got a river very close by, and I've got one of our major cities all within reach. So I would be drawing on those contexts to build both the knowledge and the skills as well. It's so that you can make the most of your environment and where you live, and your children live, your sort of geographical features. So the skills ladders can be used alongside your local requirements to teach certain knowledge. And that's why they're focused on skills based on a progressive curriculum rather than a knowledge-rich curriculum. So any questions about that, do pop it in the chat. I think this has been one of the key sort of misunderstandings about the skills ladders. People have sort of said, well, you know, where's the knowledge? You might use it alongside the English national curriculum for geography. If you don't have a geography curriculum, that's freely available. You can Google it and you could use that as your basis. You might use it alongside a PYP approach. That's an international baccalaureate approach for early years, or an MYP for middle years program. So our skills ladders can be used alongside many different curricula. What they give you are a clear pathway through the skills that you should be covering in your geography curriculum. So Just to reiterate, for those who've joined late, it can be used alongside a range of geography curricula and textbooks. It's in addition to make sure that we're not just teaching a knowledge-based curriculum, we're also developing those skills. So any questions about that, do put it in the Q&A, put your hand up, or put it in the chat. Okay, so let's have a look at how they are structured. So the skills ladders have been split into 4 core strands, as you can see on the screen in front of you. Now, this is just a suggestion, and if you're a geography expert, it's your passion, your love as a teacher, and you think, all right, I really want to do this. We always say with all of our curriculum, it can be used flexibly. Also follow your interests and your passion and what you have to work on in your local context as well. So they can be adapted to better suit the needs of your particular locality. So the 4 strands that we have that underpin the skills ladder are built progressively over the years. Also, they're revisited during the primary and lower secondary years, building both in depth and in breadth. So you can see here on the screen, our 4 core strands are atlas and mapping skills, strand 2, cartographic skills, and then strand 3, investigative skills, and strand 4, graphical skills. So there's quite a lot of maths in here. So it's worth liaising, particularly with your maths department. So let's dig deeper into each of these strands and see what skills are covered within them. So let's look at strand 1, atlas and map skills. So in this first strand, and it's AMS, atlas and map skills, that seems quite obvious. Students will be building their proficiency in the use of atlases and maps to locate key places, geographical features around the world. So in the first few years, students will learn how to locate continents and oceans, as well as their home country. And we use a variety of maps to do that. Students will also develop an understanding of how to recognise lines of latitude and longitude, and how these can help to locate places and features around the world. So as our students develop their use of atlases and maps, they're going to begin to look at locating places with greater degree of complexity. So they'll revisit the core skills, but it becomes deeper, more complex as they revisit these. So they'll be using a range of maps, including sketch maps, so that by the time they're year 9, they will have developed that wide repertoire of mapping skills, providing a firm foundation to move on to international GCSE as well. So let's look at strand 2. So strand 2, and often people actually block these together very closely, but actually there are distinctly separate skills within these 2 strands. Now, this one, students are actually looking at things like compass points, grid references, and you'll see referenced in the skills Ordnance Survey. Now, Ordnance Survey maps are very UK-centric. So if you in your country have your own national maps with their own keys, then that's what we would certainly suggest that you are using. Always go back to your local context. So students begin by using 4 compass points, building it up to 8 compass points, and map symbols to navigate routes. And then over time, they're building on these foundations to use 4, then 6-figure grid references, and then also different scales, as well as understanding contours and the different keys on maps. And this is where, you know, it's highly skilled base if we need to take it out of the classroom and get our learners realizing actually these are practical skills that they are learning. Our third strand is investigative skills. Now, these give our students opportunities to conduct geographical inquiry. And I think that's fantastic because geography should be about inquiry. We often talk about inquiry-based learning in science, but geographical inquiry is really an important foundation to understand this subject through their own first-hand experience, answering the questions that they have devised. So they experience field work, and it's not just sort of tokenistic field work. It becomes core to what they're doing. That field work doesn't mean they have to get on a bus to go anywhere. It could be their local school. It could extend to the street outside the school, the village, the town, wherever the locality that your school is situated in. And over time, our students are going to conduct at least 2 different field work inquiries during the academic year. And I say at least 2. It depends on how much geography you have timetabled, but ideally we suggest at least 2. And again, through each of these field work inquiries, then the skills are becoming more complex, so that by the time they're in year 9, then they've had regular opportunities to participate in a range of different human and physical fieldwork experiences. Our 4th strand, graphical skills, is now where we're looking at their proficiency in creating, producing, interpreting data and different data presentation techniques. So working again very closely with our maths department, because often these skills will be used in science as well. And quite often the geography department, the science department and the maths department are teaching these graphical skills, these data skills separately. And our learners don't realise actually it's the same skill set. So close coordination between your departments and colleagues is key. So from year 1 to 9, they build their proficiency in producing and interpreting more complex graphs and giving them an opportunity to experience different graph types. So in the scheme of work, the core strands of investigative skills and graphical skills are combined, because students will be constructing and analysing graphs whilst they're undertaking their fieldwork inquiry. So a key part of the fieldwork will be developing those graphical skills. And we know that that's the best way to develop these skills, when learners actually realise it's not just something they're doing for the sake of it. They're actually out on the road, marking different vehicles that go past as a tally chart, and then producing that as a bar graph or even a pictogram. There's actually a reason. So it's highly sort of motivating for them. So these 4 strands underpin the skills ladder of geography, and they build progressively over the years so that students can work towards developing mastery by the end of year 9. Remember, they're not taught in isolation, they are progressive, and I often feel that rather than pushing the skills too hard when they're younger, get the basics in place when they're young. Make it fun, make it enjoyable, because we're going to keep revisiting and revisiting these skills as they go through the years. So the core skills have been grouped together to illustrate where you can give students opportunities to demonstrate a skill while delivering a core component of the main geography curriculum. So that means that each of the skills have a sub-skill set that students would develop at any one time. So for example, if we were, and I'm just, excuse me while I look at my notes here, if we look at atlas and map skills, 1.1a to 1.1d, that could form part of a unit focused on students learning about the world around them. So it can fit into a topic that you're covering. That might be a fully cross-curricular topic that you're teaching at year 1, if you're not discretely teaching geography. So it can fit in with your other areas of the curriculum as well. So as I've said, the skills ladder is designed for you to keep revisiting these skills multiple times during the academic year, to give students lots of different opportunities to practice the skills in different contexts. So we don't just teach it once. We'll come back to it. They'll relate it to different learning, different areas of the curriculum that you're covering. So to give you an example, if we think of atlas and map skills, again, 1A to D, you might revisit this when students are looking at a particular continent for a unit of study, and then study it later again in the academic year. And the example I think of, anyone that's joined us for implementation training, we would use a book called Little Bear, Big Giant, and it's set in the Arctic. So we might be combining it, the geography skills, into actually an English unit is possible. Always look for those cross-curricular links as well. So therefore, while the scheme of work is chronologically ordered in a series of lessons for each year group, you might choose to revisit a skill many more times or in different contexts, depending on your knowledge curriculum. So you're looking to see, how do these skills fit in to your knowledge curriculum? So let's have a look at what it is we give you. So we give you schemes of work. Now, the schemes of work provide your framework of your core skills. And as I say, they can be flexible, they can be adapted. But these are the skills that we would be looking to assess. You may have well taught them and revisited them multiple times throughout the year. And as I say, the skills ladder gives you that progression. But you can see there in the 4th column, we've got our global land masses. Let me just get my pen here. Oh, it doesn't seem to be working. Ah, there we go. I've got an arrow. Let me go back. Forgotten I put an arrow on this slide. You can see there how it fits into a knowledge curriculum, maybe about locating places, our global land masses and oceans. You will have in your knowledge curriculum the various topics that either maybe you've designed or have been given to you through your knowledge curriculum that you're following. So let's have a look at how we build these into your curriculum. So if we've seen, geography is not about just learning lots of facts. Knowledge is important when devising a geography curriculum. It's necessary to incorporate the skills into that knowledge base. So when Pearson were designing the skills ladder, they were aware that because iPLS is used around the world, lots of schools had a geography curriculum that might be a national curriculum they were required to follow, or one that the school had actually already devised. But what that lacked, it tended to be quite factually knowledge-based. What it lacked were, how do we develop skills in a progressive way? So that's where the skills ladders have come from. They give you all of the skills to be progressively developed as you are teaching your knowledge-based curriculum. So step 1, decide on your core area of focus for the curriculum that you wish to teach. So this might be suggested in your curriculum that you're using. It might be, say, from the English national curriculum, if that's what you're basing your curriculum, or your national curriculum, or a textbook that you're using to teach geography, or something you have devised. So suggested focus may be place knowledge, location knowledge, physical human processes, geographical skills, fieldwork skills. These are the sorts of common topics, areas rather, that we see. Step 2 would be to dig in and decide on the threshold concepts that you want your pupils to know by the end of each year. So for the purpose of this skills ladder and the accompanying scheme of work and the guidance document, the following concept areas are suggested. And they are your navigation, your mapping, so lots of skills in there. Physical features, you may well combine your field work into work on some of your physical features as well as human features. And then field work and data presentation. So that might not be taught discreetly. It might come under your other areas focus, but you're thinking about what is the standard? What is it I want my learners to know and be able to do by the end of the year? And of course, sustainability is really, really key at present. So once you've decided the focus and then dug down into the concepts, step 3 would be to actually look at the skills ladder and decide what skills from which of the core strands is it that I want my learners to develop through this unit that I'm teaching, through this particular topic that I'm teaching. So just going to have a look at those sort of core concept areas. So step 2 in a bit more depth with you. So step 2, and this is in your guidance document as well. So navigation, there's a lot of skills in there, and it maps really nicely across to our cartographic and our atlas and mapping skills. Physical features, we may well be doing topics, focuses on beaches, rivers, oceans, mountain, vegetation, and then our human features, trade, transport, settlement. And then we've got our fieldwork and data presentation and our sustainability. And I know that these are the ones that children really love, particularly now, is sustainability. It's a key concern for our youngsters. So your knowledge curriculum may well cover these, your textbook may cover these. What we want you to do is think about what skills you're developing alongside these particular units as well. So let's have a look and take an example. So from my knowledge-based curriculum, my textbook maybe, or my curriculum document, I'm going to do a focus on settlements. And I've decided to make it inquiry-based. So I've sort of come up with a big question. Now, I quite often used to teach using a big question, and then all of the work would lead towards answering that big question that we would always reflect on at the end of every lesson and then at the end of that unit. If you're teaching, for instance, PYP, International Baccalaureate, or MYP, then actually you might have a statement. Some teachers don't have anything at that point. They just say, well, we're going to do a unit on settlements. So once I've decided on my focus and my core skills, my core concepts that I knowledge-wise that I want the learners to learn about settlements, I now come across to my skills ladder and actually think, okay, through this particular unit of work, these are the skills that I want my learners to really develop. And you can see they range here from beginning to ask geographic questions, recording with photograph sketches, using primary, secondary sources, to annotating observations, but with data, making tables, and then drawing together to make conclusions, and basic pictograms and bar graphs. So I've identified from the skills ladders the skills that I want them to develop proficiency in as we're working through this unit. And here you can see a key stage 3 example. That was a primary example. So key stage 3 example, maybe we're doing some work on rivers. And the big question I've come up with is, how do the characteristics of the River Stour, that's a river close to me, so we will be going on a field trip, change downstream? And you can see on the right-hand side, the skills that I've picked out from the skills ladder that I would be evaluating my learners against at the end of this unit. Are they able to suggest suitable inquiry-based questions? Can they plan a risk assessment? Can they record primary data and then present that data in different types of graphs? And I would expect my key stage 3 learners to know which sort of graphs and why one graph is more suitable than another, and also to be able to analyze that data, looking for patterns, looking for trends, and then draw their findings together to make a conclusion, as well as limitations. Now, I mean, I do a lot of work supporting some learners at university level, and these are key skills for undergraduate study. Are they actually considering the limitations of their work? And we want them to do that at international GCSE, A-level, all the way through to graduate. So we start that really early as a skill. How could they improve things? So what was difficult? What were the limitations? I know, as an example, my daughter for international GCSE went to study a river, do field work in Spain on a river, and it had been particularly dry when they got there. So lots of limitations. How could the study have been improved? And it's really important that we don't tell our learners, we get them to consider this themselves. So do keep any questions coming. So what I want to do now is think about, how do we take this and actually now produce the lesson plan? Now, if you've been to the implementation training for iPLS, you'd already be familiar with our template for our lesson plans. I'm going to take you through what is it you need to consider when putting together your lesson. So our iPLS lessons should include the following: collaboration and teamwork. Really, really important. And increasingly important. If you look at data from the World Economic Forum, you'll see that as a skill, the ability to collaborate is actually becoming more and more important in the workplace. So we need to be developing these skills, and we've written a session actually that we deliver as part of iPLS training now on collaboration. So geography is a great subject to really develop those collaborative teamwork skills, including presentation skills, leadership skills in our learners. We need to make sure active learning is taking place. So that doesn't mean just physically active. It means that the brain is active, that they are thinking deeply, thinking beyond what the knowledge they're being delivered. How is that relevant to their particular context? What are the challenges of the region they live in, the area they live in? As well as opportunities for critical thinking. And often, if good active learning is taking place, then so is good critical thinking. But often critical thinking is developed through your careful questioning. And then are there opportunities for you to assess learners? Not the test, but how do you assess your learners as the work is being undertaken? Have you considered the activities and how you're going to evaluate the extent that learning has taken place? And finally, differentiation. Are you being inclusive in the way you have designed your lesson? So let's have a look at what that might look like at the planning stage. Now, this is a standard iPLS lesson plan template. You don't have to produce one that looks like this in a Word document at all. Maybe yours are just some notes on a piece of paper. They may be a brainstorm. I know in many of my first formative teaching years, my lessons were planned literally as a mind map. But the main thing is, these are the areas that we want you to consider. As we've seen, you choose your main focus. So your main focus is going to be the knowledge and the skills that you want to develop in this lesson. Consider the prior knowledge, because your lesson is not going to get very far if you don't check that learners have the prior knowledge required to actually undertake this activity or understand the knowledge. So you need to have considered that. And key vocabulary. Most of your learners will be English as an additional language. So what are the tricky words? And many years of my teaching career, I taught EAL learners. Don't make assumptions. Sometimes that basic language vocabulary, actually, they don't really have a deep understanding of it. So identify which are the key words, what key vocabulary do you need to explicitly cover and check that the learners really understand. And then identify your curriculum objectives, either from your knowledge curriculum. So you might have some knowledge objectives as well as your skills ladder objectives. Now, we normally work on a 3-part lesson. So we'd have a quick starter, and then we'd have a main activity, a plenary, and then make notes about anything else we need. So let's have a look at this step by step. I'm sorry, I forgot that I had to put click-throughs on here. So this is your pre-teaching information. And often teachers focus on the lesson they're teaching, and they don't think about, well, what is it my learners need to be able to do before I can teach this? What's the vocabulary that could be the stumbling points? They normally focus on, these are the objectives that I want to cover. And often they're knowledge-based objectives because they're easier to assess. So what we're saying is, think about the knowledge objectives, but also your skills-based objectives. So here's an example. This is a year 3 lesson. The main focus is about the wider world, and it's about the learners knowing continents, able to locate them on a world map, identify the oceans, and we've got vocabulary here. And it's interesting that we can make an assumption that a learner really understands what a continent is. That's actually quite a complex concept when you really unpick it for a young learner. And I've chosen here just skills ladders objectives, because actually there is an overlap there with the knowledge-based objectives. So here's my starter, and I've put on this screen a choice of 3 different starters. I found that YouTube is teacher's friend. I found a song on YouTube. I might have pre-planned some cards with continents on where they're looking at the shape of the continent, or maybe I'm going to start with a map. How are you going to introduce and check the prior knowledge? What is it you want them to learn? So this is an assessment as well of what do they know before I move on. It probably only takes 5-10 minutes, depending on how long your lesson is. Now, for my main activity, I've chosen to do a Freya model. If you're not familiar with that, Google it. You'll see it's used a lot in, for instance, science. I use it in English. I use it in geography. I've put it in green because I've identified that actually this is active learning. And I've got collaboration and teamwork going on because they're going to use talk partners. And it's vocabulary focused. I've also identified in blue here my formative assessment. I want to check as the learning's taken place that actually my learners can identify the difference between a country and a continent, and they can verbalize that, they can express it. They know what the key features of a continent are, and possibly the key features of a country as well. and why an ocean isn't part of a continent. My main activity, as you can see here, has also been differentiated. Now, in its simplest form, differentiation, I like to think of it as TOGS, T-O-G-S. Now, on the screen, I've differentiated based on task. You can see I've identified 3 different tasks. I've got a core task, an extend task, and a support task. So I may have 3 different groups. If we think of the O for differentiation, that might be where I have 1 task. All learners do the same task. However, the differentiation is the complexity of the outcome. So my more able learners, I would expect more complex thinking, more complex graphical representation, maybe, or complex questioning than maybe other learners. My G is grouping. I may decide to pull a group together to extend. I may decide to pull a group together to support. And my S of TOGS is differentiation by support. Maybe my less able learners, if they're doing some data collecting, I give them an outline of a graph to really already fill in to support their learning. Maybe I physically am there to support their learning. So it can look many different ways. That's just a simple way, but do consider your differentiation. And as I say, it doesn't have to be different tasks. My preferred way is often different outcomes and then different levels of support. But do put any questions in the chat. At the end of our learning, so 5 minutes before the end of the lesson, we should conduct a plenary. Now, we all understand the broad aims of a plenary, but they help teachers check for understanding. And we can now evaluate our teaching, reflect on our teaching, and the learning that's taken place. Also, well-planned plenary can help our learners consolidate that knowledge and the skills that they've learnt, and the understanding they've developed in that lesson. So they reflect on, well, what have we just done? And what have I learnt? What couldn't I do before the lesson? What didn't I understand? But now at the end of this lesson, I can do this, and I understand this, and I've learnt this. And then they realise they've made progress, and actually they've learnt in that lesson. Also, your plenary informs your future practice. So it enables you to discover what worked well or what went well, and what gaps in learning still exist that you will need to build on in the spiral when you next come back to that skill as well. So what is it you need to plan to revisit later on? So, and it's also important to check knowledge as well as checking on the development of the geographical skills. So it doesn't matter what your lesson plan looks like. I've got a formalized template here that we used in our course subjects for iPLS, but yours might just be a mind map. It might be a series of notes. You might have put together a PowerPoint, and it's some of your notes on your PowerPoint. It's really about, have you thought through these different aspects of the lesson before you deliver it? Or do you just open that textbook? Because that's not planning a lesson. There's a lot more to delivering a lesson to that. I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A and the chat as we go through. Just as before I stop, just to that everyone's aware, the geography skills ladders are on both platforms, the Active Learn Primary, Active Learn Digital. And I'm just going to change my screen share onto the primary to begin with. It's under our iPrimary. Click on resources. and then find the geography. And there are the 3 documents. Those 3 documents are on the secondary site under iPLS tile, and also then under the skills ladders tile. So your view, I won't go onto my secondary site because I know every school, their secondary site can look very different, because often there's international GCSE resources, A-level resources, depending on what you teach. But under the iPLS, you will see a thumbnail for the progression, the skills ladders, and that's where you'll find your geography skills ladders documents. Any questions about that, do pop them in the chat and I'll answer them. So now's your chance for any questions. Please make sure you don't leave today's session without asking a question. But hopefully during the course of the webinar, you do understand now the skills ladders, how they've been designed, how they work, and how you can use them alongside your knowledge-based curriculum to design your geography lessons, really focusing in on learning about your region, your locality, using the resources you have around you to create your bespoke lesson plans. Please sort of think of your questions, either put your hand up and I'm more than happy to answer them, pop them in the Q&A or in the chat before you leave. Just remains for me to say these sessions have been recorded. I undertook one last week, exactly the same, there was no difference. They will be edited and then you will be able to access this recording again via our YouTube. If you have any questions about accessing that or you'd like the link, do contact Stacey.roberts@pearson.com and she can make sure you have access, or go to our Pearson's International website where you should see a link for it. It will take a week to 10 days for that recording to be put up on YouTube. But it will be available because I know quite a few people, often through time, excuse me, different time zones, join at different times. So, just excuse me. Frog in my throat there. It just remains for me to say thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm going to stay here for a minute or two. So if you have any questions, please answer them before you leave. And as I said at the beginning, if you've got a question, probably it's the same question somebody else is thinking about. Please make sure you ask your question before you leave the webinar, and I will do my very best to answer it and support you in any way I can. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon or possibly this evening where you are. As I say, just take a few moments before you leave, think about any questions, pop me in either the chat or the Q&A. And thank you for joining us. We've got a great range here from Ghana, Mombasa, Nairobi. Ah, Irfan, hello. I remember, yes, there's a name there I recognize. It's a good question. When is the PE training? I don't know. I'm not aware that one has been planned. What I would suggest is email Stacey.roberts@pearson.com, or I'm not sure where you are, but if you're in Africa, talk to Gabriel or the Pearson team and make a request for any particular webinars. We base our webinars on requests from schools. So if there's something that you need, ask for it. So if you'd like training in the PE skills ladders, then please put a request in for that training as well. There's a few names here I recognize as well. So it's lovely to see you again virtually, and hopefully we can meet again face to face as well. So thank you ever so much for joining the session. If there's no other questions, I'm going to close the session before my dog starts coughing in the background, which is the noise. And hopefully you found it useful today. Okay, take care, everyone. Just checking the Q&A actually before I leave to make sure there's nothing come through on there. Okay. Just one question. That's a great question. And I'm sure lots of you were thinking that. Do students need to take a geography assessment or exam? We don't have any. And that's because we want you to use your local context. The first formal exam we have, of course, is the International GCSE for geography. Most schools will design their own geography assessments based on the knowledge and skills that they have been teaching. So do they need to? Absolutely not. And if you're teaching an IB-based curricula, such as PYP or MYP, then actually your formative assessment should give you the information that you need rather than having to formally test your learners. If you are deciding to test your learners, I would suggest that you look carefully at the test and consider how much of it is knowledge-based, and does this test have opportunities for learners to show their skills? And maybe you might allocate a certain number for the test for knowledge, and you might then award skill and a mark for skills as well. And that could be formatively assessed through coursework. And if you think of the International GCSE, the way that works, but no, they don't need to take an assessment or exam, especially if your formative assessment is good. And that's why in the examples I gave, it was in blue. It's a very important part of your teaching. So thank you for that question. It's a really good question. I'm sure others were thinking of it. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.